Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Building My Trike. Over here against the fiberglass panel, I have stuck down 3 of the sides of the bag for the part that I'm going to be doing, and I've cut all the peel ply and release agent and everything. Not release agent, release film. And in the meantime, I've also cut 2 bits of chipboard and marked out about roughly where the disc cover is going to go. So that's going to go up into the CNC, and I'm going to CNC out the other side for the 16-inch wheel. So it's not going to be the best being out of chipboard, but I'm going to fill all the chips up with either body filler or putty, probably body filler, and then sand it back smooth and then glaze it with a either resin or gel coat. So that's going to be the mold for the other side. And I cut some aluminium chunky bits for the rear wheel mounts. So I've got one side over here with a hole in it, and I've got this side with a 12mm by 1.5 thread, and then a 10mm by 1 thread. So I've got all those taps from previous years of building bikes. So I just marked out, this is on my road bike, I just took it out just then so I can mark where it needs to go. So I'm going to have to cut that out on a bandsaw and then file it to perfection, and then I can start figuring out how I'm going to mount this into the rear half of the bike, because I still haven't figured that out yet. Unfortunately, my Fusion 360 subscription, which was free on a home hobbyist version, has run out, and you can renew it, but it only gives you 80 square centimeters of bed space that you can use, and they limit it because it's a home hobbyist. You can get a student version, but you have to prove the documents and all this other stuff, so I can't dodgy that. And you can do a paid subscription, which is $80 a month. And considering I'm only ever going to use this once more, so once to do this, I'm probably not going to use it for another few years, $80 to make one mold is just stupidly overpriced. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to 3D print a mold, or 3D print a part to make a mold with. So what I will do is I will cut this circle out, and then I will print a 82mm by 18mm deep disc, 3D print that, and then I'll fill that in with plaster or something and just keep going around with a straight edge until it's absolutely perfect. Then I can glass over that, make a mold from that, pop it out, do the carbon part in that. So it's a little bit more time consuming, a little bit more annoying, but it'll be worth it, I guess. Like, it'll mean I get another disc cover for that. It'll just mean that this flat edge, the part won't come up to this bit and then go flat. It'll just come right to the edge here. So there'll be a bead of silicone on, or whatever I used to stick it down with, on the inside there. So it won't be as perfect, but it'll be better than paying $80 for a subscription of Fusion 360. I could find another program that does basically the same thing for free, but right now I can't be bothered, so I'm just going to do this for now and research that later. So I 3D printed the 82 by 18 circle, and I cut out the circle for the plywood. So now I just got to fill in that. I'll probably use some plaster, and I've literally got an entire bag. Carbon fibre has been laid onto the front axle support majiggy, and I've taped the bearing housings in for now. I've placed it in place, get in there, and set up where the front wheels are going to go. They're going to go quite wide, but This goes in maybe 0.5 millimeter because I've got to sand it out a bit. So it'll be quite wide stance on this bike. So I might have little notches cut out here where the wheel will be turning into. So when you look on a bike, there'll be like a tiny little notch at the front and the back, which sort of makes a difference to aero, but I'm not too fussed. And what I'm doing now, so this is the rear wheel setup and the derailleur hanger. If you go all the way back, the derailleur butts up here and it's going to foul, and if you go all the way forward, well, I don't want to go all the way forward, so I do it around the middle where the 500 millimeter mark is going to be, and hold it roughly in place, have this horizontal, and I'll try and get a good view for the camera without getting my hand in the way. But if you push that all the way down and that all the way down, it literally barely touches the bottom of the bike. It's like super duper close. So I reckon it's going to be fine. I reckon it's not going to, even if it does, I might have to like notch out a tiny little bit on the bottom, but that's only in first gear that it will do that. But there's plenty of room for the derailleur to jiggle about. Top gear, it's clearance, and all the other gears, there's going to be heaps of clearance. So absolutely stoked on that. It was one of the things in the bike that I wasn't quite sure on, but quite happy with the result, knowing that it's going to all work out. At worst, if the derailleur does fail on the bike, I can always drop it down a couple of millimeters. Currently I've got the bike sitting on 2 blocks of wood, which is 65 millimeters, but that depends on where you position it. If I put those blocks at the front, move my finger, if I put them at the front here, it will raise the bike up a little bit, and if I put them at the back where it starts to curve up again, it'll drop it down a little bit. So I can always drop those blocks out and put it to 60 millimeters at the back, just to give me a little bit more clearance, and then have 2 blocks at the front as a 65. So it'll be like kicked back just a little bit, but not too worried about that. I can also just drop it another 5 mil or 10 mil. So I want a little bit of ground clearance for riding on the road, but I'm gonna have to compromise, I guess, see what I can come up with. Just had a bit of an idea. What I want to do is somehow tie the bike into the rear wheel, and the rear wheel stays just here. But because it's sort of a monocoque shape, I don't really know how to do that. There's a simple method of like triangulating and making an internal frame just with like, you know, space frame type structure, but that's not what I've done for the first half of the bike. And this sort of leads into that for the back half of the bike, and somehow you have to match it together. So what I want to do is put some stays from here straight across to a T-piece that runs across the bike, and then a bit that goes up, triangulates, and then a bit for the headrest as well up the top here. So you've got sort of a bit of a triangulation here, and then somehow mold, fix that into the monocoque structure. So what I want to do is try and bend these sides in to touch here, so when I glue it I can vacuum form, boom, straight onto the side like that, and that bonds that in, and then I can do a few more layers on the outside and whatever, and then just fill it with foam, and then like the wheel arch here that's gonna protect the wheel from the chain. So what I've done is I've drilled 2 little holes, one in one side, one in the other, and I've peeled a little bit, not a lot. I've peeled the carbon off the bike, so it's just flapping in the air. So it's a little bit uneven. This side's a little bit uneven compared to that side. So I've sort of got to release a bit of tension off here and try and even it up. But that helps you can see I've got a little bit of a gap, which makes it also easier to lift the bike out. So when you're bringing it out, it'll lift straight up and then pop out the rear hatch, rather than, because we've got like these little lips here. What I'll be doing is I'll notch from like the bottom here at the front, and then do like a shape so the derailleur still clears and everything like that. I'll cut that out, and then I'll try and bend this in and glue it to that. But what I'm going to do is 3D print a part that attaches to here, and I can carbon fibre it in and then extend that into a tubular structure, which will then bond into the tube across frame on here. So it's an idea for now. I don't know if it's actually going to work, but this is the process of building a bike. If I had just trialed this and it didn't work and then came up with another idea, you wouldn't know about it. So it might not work. So in the future, I might change my idea completely, but this is what I'm going with for now. So let's see if it works. A little bit of an addition to that idea: instead of going from here into a tubular structure into the cross member, go from here into a triangular section that fills up this entire gap, and then I can bond over it. So I'll still glue the carbon onto here, but I'll only glue it like 25 mil, and then whatever triangular shape that creates, I can fill it in with foam or 3D print something, or I'm not sure, but I can fill that in, then carbon over that, then it'll give a big chunky triangle, similar to how I've done my streamliner, where I just did a bit of foam block, carbon over it, and then mount my big ass bolts, mounting brackets to it. I can do that to here and then go out to the stay and then bond it into that. So that'll be a lot stronger. And then once I pour the foam and sit in the bike and then do another layer over the top with carbon fibre, that should increase the rigidity of the frame, so it doesn't torque or anything either. So but this whole top bit will be coming up like that, and then like over the top, enough that I can still get the wheel out, but it'll sort of come up where the disc, what do you call it, the wheel arch cover sits. And then I'll obviously have my headrest in here somewhere. It'll all be like one piece molded into the bike, so I just sit into it like a perfect seat, like my streamliner. So that's the idea. I think I'll stick with that one because it's a lot better. It'll bond in. I can still do a tubular structure here and then just fill it with foam or whatever, or pack a bit of styrofoam in that gap or whatever. What I'll have to do is just trace it out. But I think this is going to work. I've put some plaster over this mould, a bit of timber with the 3D printer bit. You can see a little bit of red sticking through. So all I have to do now, it's sort of dry enough to start sanding. So I can sand it off, sand it flat into the shape that I want, and then leave it for a couple of weeks to dry, especially with this rain that's been happening so often recently. I'll leave it a while to dry out, because the timber would have absorbed a lot of moisture, and the plaster still has to off gas or dry out completely before I put any resin on it to seal the surface. And over here I got my disc brake in the mail, so I'm going to size that up and see how I'm going to mount that. I've welded my bracket up for welding the front axle wheel mounts. I haven't machined the bit up yet, but this is prepped and ready to go for when I do that. And the plaster is sort of dry. I put it in the oven last night just to cook it a little bit more. I tried using sandpaper with a timber sanding block, and the sandpaper clogged up real quick. So what I'll do is I'll use a coarse file and then just use a wire brush to brush the file off and get all the crap out of the file that clogs it up. So that'll be a lot quicker than using sandpaper, because you can't really clean that out. This carbon sleeve holding the bearings, it's got a little bit of a bump in it, but it's actually quite smooth. So what I'm doing is going around and just putting a little tiny groove in it with that V piece over there, just enough that it's got something to grip to when it glues and I put carbon in, so it doesn't want to slip up and down at worst case scenario. I'm sure if I rough the edges up it'll still work fairly good anyway, but yeah, I just want just a little bit extra precaution. I'm not going too deep because this wall thickness isn't very much at all, so I'm just going to notch it just a little bit and then do another one here, and that's sort of the maximum distance where it's going to glue in. Now I know I said I wasn't going to do it, but I did it anyway. I glued the bits in. I figured having those metal bits there in the clamp inside the carbon wouldn't do too well, because it does get hot, and it's going to be fine clamping that in, and then I can get a better earth throughout the entire length of the rod, so I don't get any spot like arcs. So I can clamp for the neutral return on the welder into a better position, and yeah, it's just going to be a lot easier. And I just wanted to see how this looks, because it looks pretty sick. So I've got a setup here. I've got a block with a bit of plastic that is the right height. So I'll leave it in this block until the glue goes off, just so if it does slip, it's not going to slip any further than the timber. I've put a layer of body filler on the mould of a plug, and I'm just waiting for it to dry. And it's only been a few hours, but the glue has gone off on this to the point where it's not going to move now that I've taken the tape off. So I can place it in the bike, like so, and start eyeing up. I've got to cut this hole out a little bit bigger. Start eyeing up how the shoulder bolts are going to go in. So now that these are glued in, every time I need to fiddle around with the wheel, I can just slide this down inside there. So I can probably even glue that in now, but I won't, because I've got to cut that side out more. But yeah, every time I want to muck around with that, I can just slide this in and out. So that is it for this week's episode. Now that I've got this all glued, I can put it in the bike and then size up the over here, size up the pedals. So to be honest, it's not that much further until completion of the bike. So once I get the bottom of the that bit glued in, I can start sorting out the chain line and then get that done, and then the rear wheel stay, and then pour foam, and I'm pretty much done. Then it's just a full wrap in carbon, bag the whole thing, and I'm done. So only a few weeks left, I reckon. So stay tuned, because the end is very close. Thanks for watching this week's episode. I'll see you next week.